Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a wild, highly theatrical, and visually intense script called The Bible and Geology. Instead of just dryly reading off facts, we're going to totally break down exactly how this source material uses visuals and rhetoric to build a super passionate argument for biblical catastrophism. We'll look at the props, the sets, the character choices, the whole shebang. So let's dive into this and see how a dramatic script tries to literally reshape our understanding of the ground beneath our feet.
We're going to follow this script's exact 5-act structure today. First up, the mechanist versus the thinker. Then the geologic column debate, followed by the Cambrian explosion mystery. After that, we'll hit missing links and degeneration, and finally wrap up with catastrophism and fossil graveyards. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the mechanist versus the thinker.
Right out of the gate, the source establishes its core ideological battle. It completely throws out uniformitarianism, that classic evolutionary idea that the present is the key to the past, and that the Earth changes through super slow, uniform processes. Instead, the script goes all in on catastrophism. It asserts that violent worldwide forces, specifically a literal global flood, are what actually carved out the physical features of the Earth we see today.
And to sell this argument, the text uses a brilliant, frankly dramatic visual juxtaposition. It introduces a character called the Mechanist, who represents evolutionary geology. Picture this guy, hyper-clean silver suit, frantically drawing imaginary lines inside this cold, sterile, digital 3D laser grid labeled the distant past. It's very sci-fi. But then on the flip side, we meet the Thinker, representing the creationist view. He's wearing cozy, earth-toned clothes, hanging out in warm, organic, physical sets, and using real, tactile props, blocks, fossils, glass bowls of water. So before a single piece of data is even debated, the script is already painting the evolutionary stance as this cold, abstract theory, while framing catastrophism as warm, logical, and deeply grounded in physical reality.
Moving right along to Section 2, the geologic column debate.
The script puts our thinker character right at a physical table with a really clever, tangible prop, a scattered box of dominoes. The whole argument here is that the neat 12-layer geologic column you see in biology textbooks is totally contrived. The claim is that if you scatter dominoes representing all these mixed-up Earth layers, and you go in presuming evolution is true beforehand, well, you're naturally just going to stack them perfectly from simple to complex. You draw up a pristine chart, print it in a book, and call it proof. The text uses this visual to argue that geologists are just artificially organizing a messy fossil record based entirely on theoretical evolutionary assumptions, not actual physical evidence.
And this domino visual perfectly sets up the script's next major attack, which zeroes in on a massive math discrepancy. The source argues that if you actually took all the theoretical rock layers from the last 2 billion years and stacked them perfectly on top of each other, like the textbooks suggest, that pile would be 130 miles deep. But look at reality. The Earth's actual outer crust is only roughly 25 to 30 miles thick. The script gleefully points out that this evolutionary timeline is, quite literally, too big for the physical planet.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Cambrian explosion mystery.
The text poses a really direct, critical question to the viewer here. When you dig down to the lowest index layer of fossil-bearing rock, thousands of wildly complex sea creatures instantly flash into the fossil record. So why do evolutionary leaders often call this sudden appearance of life a major mystery? Well, it's because these highly complex creatures just explode into existence with absolutely zero half-formed ancestors in the rocks below them.
To anchor this abstract idea in reality, the script uses a cool 3D microlens overlay to zoom in on a trilobite. It points out that this ancient, supposedly primitive creature actually possessed optical lenses that were so mathematically complex, scientists didn't even fully understand the math behind them until the last century. For the script, this trilobite serves as one of the thinker's tactile physical proofs of immense instant complexity. It's meant to directly shatter the mechanist's slow, gradual theoretical models.
And for the thinker, this sudden appearance of complex life isn't a mystery at all. The script argues it's exactly what common sense would expect from Noah's global deluge. Think about it. In a massive worldwide water cataclysm, churning water-laid sediment would instantly bury creatures. Naturally, the simpler, denser, and less mobile sea creatures, like those trilobites, would just sink straight to the absolute bottom of the mud first. It uses straight-up physical, mechanical logic to explain why the rock layers look the way they do.
All right, on to Section 4, missing links and degeneration.
The visual storytelling here leans into another huge contrast. We see the mechanist on this frantic search across the museum floor, hopelessly holding up a giant iron chain that is almost entirely missing. Meanwhile, the thinker is standing calmly in a beautiful, organic physical museum setting, dropping a staggering statistic. Out of 250,000 different fossil species cataloged in the world's museums, representing millions of actual fossils, the source claims there are exactly 0 verified transitions between major animal kinds. The script loudly declares that evolutionary geology is really nothing more than gapology.
And to back up a claim that bold, the source pulls a highly strategic rhetorical move. It uses the words of Charles Darwin himself. The script points out that Darwin admitted the regular absence of transitional forms was, quote, the most serious objection against his own theory. By leveraging this exact quote, the source material brilliantly tries to validate its argument using the very founder of the opposing worldview.
Then, the text takes evolutionary theory and just flips it completely upside down. It contrasts the evolutionary expectation of constant progression, the idea that species become hardier and better over time, against what it calls the record of degeneration. It argues that the physical geologic record actually shows the exact opposite of survival of the fittest.
How does it prove this? By bringing out even more massive, incredible physical fossil props. The script highlights physical evidence of ancient gigantism. We are talking about fossilized dragonflies with bodies a staggering foot long, and ancient frogs that grew close to 10 feet in length. It's wild. The text uses these gigantic physical specimens to argue that, rather than evolving upward, the Earth is actually experiencing a terrible, universal decay, with ancient creatures being systematically larger, stronger, and superior to modern ones.
And for our grand finale, Section 5, Catastrophism and Fossil Graveyards.
The camera sweeps over this massive, dramatic, physical cross-section of the Earth that the script calls a fossil graveyard. Here, the source outlines the super-specific physical conditions required to actually make a fossil. I mean, an animal can't just die and slowly get covered up over millions of years. It would just decay or get eaten by scavengers. It requires fast, instant burial. The script points out that 70% of the Earth's rock strata is sedimentary, meaning laid down by water. Therefore, the millions of creatures we find violently thrown together in twisted, distorted positions must have been buried instantly. This violent physical reality is used to completely break the mechanist's pristine, slow-moving, theoretical timeline.
But amidst all this chaotic, dramatic, graveyard imagery, the script points to something as simple as an oyster. It highlights that a fossilized oyster from the supposed distant past is so identical in structure to a modern one that you could honestly serve it in a restaurant today. By emphasizing this unchanging physical nature, the script really hammers home its core thesis. Organisms were created fully formed and have simply remained exactly that way.
As the source script concludes, we witness the ultimate victory of the organic over the digital. The mechanist's entire digital world glitches out and completely fades to black, leaving the thinker standing there grounded in reality, bathed in a beam of light. The script triggers a booming symphony and drops one final striking quote from an unnamed Princeton physicist, claiming that the more you study the fossil record, the more certain you become that evolution is based upon faith alone. It is a highly orchestrated, incredibly theatrical ending designed to leave a massive, authoritative impression on the viewer.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've seen how this source relies so heavily on tactile props, physical sets, and the stark contrast between the warm thinker and the cold mechanist. It leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to ponder. When sources use such highly orchestrated, dramatic visual presentations, how much does the presentation itself shape what we ultimately believe to be true? Thanks for joining me, and always keep questioning how the information around you is built.